Every time you turn on the news, it's the same story. National debt hits another record. Trillions and trillions, piling higher every year. But here's the twist. Almost every country is in debt. Rich or poor, big or small, it doesn't matter. So, who exactly do they owe all this money to? Why not just print more cash? And is debt always bad? Let's unpack this mystery of national debt. What is national debt? Think of national debt like the government's credit card. When a government spends more than it collects in taxes, it borrows the rest. Over time, those unpaid balances add up into what we call the national debt. But unlike you or me borrowing from one bank, governments borrow from a mix of citizens, businesses, investors, and even other countries. It's a giant IOU that keeps the wheels of the economy turning. Why governments borrow? But wait, if governments can print money, why borrow at all? Here's why. First, to fill budget gaps. If taxes don't cover everything, they borrow to bridge the difference. Second, to invest in growth. Borrowing builds highways, schools, and hospitals today instead of decades later. Third, emergencies. Wars, pandemics, and recessions don't wait. Governments borrow to respond fast. Fourth, to manage old loans. Yes, governments sometimes borrow just to repay earlier debts. And fifth, as a policy tool. By issuing bonds, they can control inflation, interest rates, and even currency stability. In short, borrowing isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. Who lends money? Okay, but who's rich enough to lend billions, or even trillions? First, local investors. Citizens buy government bonds, banks park money in them, and pensions invest for stability. Second, foreign creditors. Other countries and global investors buy bonds too, because stable nations are seen as safe bets. Third, global institutions. When no one else will lend, nations turn to the IMF or World Bank. But beware, these loans come with strict rules: cut spending, raise taxes, privatize industries. That's why you often see protests after bailout deals, the good and bad of debt. So is debt good or bad? Well, it depends. Used wisely, it fuels growth. Think, new highways boosting trade, or schools creating skilled workers. Borrowing during crises can also stabilize economies. But too much debt? That's trouble. When a government spends more on interest payments than on schools or hospitals, people suffer. And if investors lose faith, borrowing costs skyrocket, pushing a country toward collapse. Debt is like fire. It can warm your home or burn it down. How much is too much? So how much debt is too much? Economists often use the debt to GDP ratio, the size of debt compared to the country's economy. Many say around 60% is manageable, but it's not a fixed rule. Japan's ratio is sky high, yet investors still trust it. Meanwhile, some countries default at much lower levels. The difference? Confidence. As long as people believe the country can pay, the system holds. Can a country be debt-free? Can a country ever be debt-free? Technically, yes. Realistically, almost never. Government bonds are the backbone of global finance. Banks, pensions, even international trade rely on them. Being completely debt-free would disrupt the entire system. For most nations, the goal isn't zero debt, it's manageable debt. So here's the bottom line. National debt isn't automatically a disaster, it's a tool. Smart borrowing can build nations. Reckless borrowing can break them. The real question isn't how much debt do we have, but are we using it wisely? Now, imagine you had the power to erase your country's debt tomorrow. Would you do it or keep borrowing for growth? Drop your answer in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for the next video, where we explore what really happens when a country defaults.